We're going to turn the time over now to Nathan Osmond. Nathan Osmond is the son of Alan Osmond. He could go for 4 hours without taking a breath. We've asked him to go for 30 minutes of fire. So he's going to go to the top of the hour, and he's going to bring it. So we're going to turn the time over to Nathan Osmond.
Yes, thank you so much. How's everyone feeling tonight, huh? Nice. This is great. I'm so glad you guys are all here with us. This is going to be fun tonight. I am going to fly through this a lot. In fact, I want to make sure that the visuals are still working up here. Let's try this here. I'm going to take this out right there. Let's see. I think this will work. We got this going. You know, you mentioned apple pie. The Osmonds have a song called One Bad Apple. We ain't got no bad apples tonight. We got good apple pie, and that's Americana. Let me get this on here for you guys. So I have some stories I want to tell. You guys okay if we tell stories? Oh, man. I grew up with stories. My father shared stories. He was in the Army. Alan Ralph Osmond served in the Army. Here it comes. There we go. And that's the number one question I'm asked is, who's your daddy? This is my daddy right here. In fact, he's the one on the far left, and you know what? He grew up as the leader of the Osmonds, and they were known as the White Jackson Five, you know? Tito, Jermaine, Michael, they're all good friends. But we followed their footsteps in singing in boy bands and stuff. You guys like boy bands? I was in one with my brothers. I used to tour with New Kids on the Block, Color Me Bad, Salt and Pepper, Naughty by Nature, all those groups. But then I went country. Do we have any country lovers? We got 4 number ones in country music, which is kind of fun. So these are just snapshots of what my life kind of looks like. But you know what? I'm also a very normal guy. I've got a podcast. It's also a radio show. I'm also a mortgage man. Guys, I'm just a proud father of these kids right here. I'm the father of 4 sons, and this is why I love America, because I get to raise my kids here. And you know what? I got my patriotism from my father, Alan Ralph Osmond, because he served in the Army during a very scary time in our nation's history. He left all the showbiz to go serve the U.S. of A. And you know where he got that? From my grandpa, George Verl Osmond Sr., who also served in the Army as an Army sergeant during World War II. My grandpa fought Nazis. And guess what? He got shell-shocked. They shipped him home. And you know what? If he hadn't been shipped home, he would have been there at D-Day. And you may have a completely different speaker here tonight. He dodged more than one bullet. My great uncle's a Pearl Harbor survivor. Claude Richardson, he was on the Medusa right there by the Utah that got sunk. And you know what? I'm so grateful that we live in a country where freedom is not free. In fact, my father produced Ronald Reagan's inauguration. All of the celebrations and the fireworks, that's how we got in the starting Stadium of Fire. It was his first fireworks show. Talk about pressure. He even flew the MOTAB out to be in front of the Abraham Lincoln Memorial there. And right before they shipped the MOTAB out on the parade, the Secret Service was like, no stopping the floats. He says, come on, that's what Nancy wants. No stopping the floats. So guess what Merrill did? My uncle, he sneaks up to the driver and says, hey, here's $500, flood the engine. And they did. And all the Secret Service were like, what's going on? What's going on? Why'd the float stop? And they sang Battle Hymn of the Republic, and it was the best part. And on national television, our president cried. You remember that, don't you? He gave that driver another $500 after the parade. Thank you so much, driver. But you know what? We love this country. We love to sing about it. And I'm so grateful for my kids. I'm so grateful I have the opportunity to be their father. I'm going to skip my first song because we'll sing plenty together. But I'm going to tell you about a story because I'm going to Boston here pretty soon. How many of you ever walked the Freedom Trail? You like the Freedom Trail? If you missed the Old South Meeting House, you missed more than just the old church where the old Boston Tea Party took place. But did you know that God has been protecting this country long before we ever came to it? In fact, 30 years before we were even declared an independent nation, God protected America. I told this story in this church, and the historian there didn't even know about it because it's been taken out of our history books. So you guys are going to hear it tonight. Watch this. At the time, 30 years before our independent nation was declared independent, guys, the year was 1746. France was at war with England. Did you know that 25% of England lived here? 1 in 4 people lived here in the colonies. And France knew that an attack on England was an attack on the colonies was an attack on England. So they were on their way with 140 ships. 100 of those ships had 10,000 troops on them. They had 40 ships that were frigates of war packed with black powder and guns and rifles and you name it. And they were on their way. Admiral Duke d'Anville had been given the orders to burn Boston to ashes, and they were on their way. So the people of Boston gathered in the Old South Meeting House that day. It was a beautiful sunny day. They walked there in the sunlight, and Thomas Prince was the reverend. Well, they had a national day of prayer where they fasted and they prayed for their safety because they knew the French were on their way. I thought it'd be fun tonight to read some of the words of Reverend Thomas Prince in that Old South Meeting House. Deliver us from the enemy. Send thy tempest, Lord, upon the waters. To the eastward, raise thy right hand. Scatter the ships of our tormentors and drive them hence. Sink their proud frigates beneath the power of thy wind. And as he prayed, the people that walked to church in the sunlight started to hear a sound outside the church. It was the wind. The wind started to kick up. It blew around that church and through the streets of Boston. It blew so hard as he prayed that the people in that church said it sounded like people were pounding on the windows. It blew so hard that it even rang the bell in the belfry arch 2 separate times. And he continued to pray. We hear thy voice, O Lord. We hear it. Thy breath is upon the waters to the eastward, even upon the deep. Thy bell tolls for the death of our enemies. Thine be the glory, Lord. Amen and amen. Well, they sent out an ensign ship to find out where the French were, and the news that they brought back was almost too miraculous to believe. That wind carried out to sea, but not only that, it carried with it a pestilence. Thousands died at sea. Thousands more were so sick they couldn't even stand on their 2 feet. Duke d'Anville says we're being defeated by an invisible enemy. So like a coward, he ordered poison and he killed himself. And now his vice admiral standing there going, I can't go back to France like this. So he draws his sword, shoves it through his own heart, and France returns mission unaccomplished. Do we hear this in our history books? The reason I tell you that story, folks, is it gets even better. Because in that congregation that day stood a little 10-year-old John Adams, who wrote in his journal, it was on that day that I became a patriot. We got 10-year-olds here today, and I'm hoping that you feel something in your heart, that a bell rings in your ears tonight, that you too can say it was on this night, the 26th of July, 2026, that I became a patriot. Because our children deserve to hear these stories, don't they? They're true. And that was the church right there. I had a chance to go to Boston. That's where Thomas Prince prayed that incredible prayer 30 years before the Declaration of Independence. These people that fought for us and died for us didn't want to have to do what they had to do. And sometimes we're asked to do hard things. John Adams said, I must study politics and war that my sons may have liberty to study mathematics and philosophy. My sons ought to study mathematics and philosophy, geography, natural history, naval architecture, navigation, commerce, and agriculture in order to give their children a right to study painting, poetry, music, architecture, statuary, tapestry, and porcelain. You know, it was the late Ronald Reagan who says that freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We did not pass it on to our children through the bloodline. It must be fought for, protected, and passed on to them to do the same. Otherwise, we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children of what life was once like in the United States when men were free. Did you love those F-16 stories? Did that bring that to life a little bit more than Top Gun? He knows what it's all about. I remember when you flew over Stadium of Fire. I saluted you, bro. You had a brother with you, didn't you? I remember you guys. Unforgettable. I love it. You know what? I love that we're celebrating 250 years of our Declaration of Independence. Do you guys know how long an average constitution lasts in the world? It's on the screen. You can cheat. 17 years. That's it. Did you know that France has had 15 constitutions? Venezuela has had 25. Haiti's had 21. Poland's had 7 just since the 20th century. And South Korea's had 6 just since World War II. Are we different? We are unique. There was a gentleman who came here. In fact, he wrote a book called Democracy in America, which we used to study in our schools. His name was Tocqueville. You remember his name. And he came here and he says this, in this book, Democracy in America, he says, America is exceptional, and I can prove it, guys. Did you know that this beautiful country right here only makes up 4% of the world's population? But with our measly little 4%, every year our 4% population produces more patents, more copyrights, more medical cures, more technological discoveries, more scientific findings. We produce more plays, more symphonies, more books, more literature, more art, more movies. Our little 4%, ladies and gentlemen, produces more than the 96% of the rest of the world. That is exceptional. Our little 4% makes up 25% of the world's gross domestic product. GDP, guys, you know what that is. Watch this. According to the World Bank, and they set the standards on what poverty is, they said that if you live on $1.25 a day, that you live in poverty. Now, half of the world lives on $1.25 a day or less. So half of the world lives in poverty. Even if you live in a developed nation like ours, guys, if you live on $2 a day, that's what they consider poverty level. Guess what? 1/4 of the world lives on $2 a day. Can you imagine? Look at this. We consider poverty levels here right around $45,000 to $47,000 a year. The rest of the world is struggling with $730 a year. So we also have 80 anti-poverty programs just in our government. In 2017, we averaged spending about $61,000 per poor family in America, and that's poverty. People would love to live in our poverty. You know how blessed you are. Wow. You know what? There was a guy who came. His name was Hezekiah Nile. He was a historian, and he was talking to Old Man Adams. This is like 42 years after the Declaration of Independence had been written. And he said, Old Man Adams, who are we to thank for all of the freedoms and the liberties that we take for granted? You were eyewitnesses to it, but who do we thank? He says, you want to know who you need to thank for all the liberties and everything that you have? He says, right there at the top of the list, you'd have to put Reverend Dr. Samuel Cooper. And you guys are all going, who? And right there next to him is Reverend Dr. Jonathan Mayhew, Reverend Dr. George Whitefield, Reverend Dr. Charles Chauncey. Have you heard of these men? Have you guys ever thought of the Declaration of Independence as a sermon topic list? But that's exactly what it is. We have to thank the reverends of their day, because leading up to those 30 years before the Declaration of Independence, the wording that we have in our Declaration of Independence came from the pulpits of America's churches. That's where it came from. Did you know that we have black fathers, founding fathers? You're like, we do? Uh-huh. What about Reverend Richard Allen? You ever heard of him? What about Reverend Absalom Jones, or Reverend John Mayhew, or Merritt, or Reverend Lemuel Haynes? You ever heard of these guys? What about this guy, Wentworth Cheswill, Lemuel Haynes? Look about this guy right here, Peter Salem, Prince Esterbrook, Thomas Hercules. Do you know we have a black founding father right here in the boat? Prince Whipple. Why don't we hear more about them? We do a terrible job with black history. We're going to do better. And I love learning history. Do you guys know that these guys here in this picture didn't even know each other? They're from different colonies, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Maryland, and they got together. And did you know that they had a 2-hour prayer session? No, we're told that our founding fathers were atheists and deists and agnostics. But here they are praying together for the first time, meeting each other in the first Continental Congress here, guys, for 2 hours. They studied 4 chapters of the Holy Bible, especially Psalms 35. I recommend you go read that tonight. Psalms 35, because this man, John Adams, said to his wife, Abigail, I must beg of you, you got to read the 35th Psalm. Read it to your family, to your father, to your friends. Abigail, we have appointed a continental fast. Millions will be upon their knees at once before their Creator, imploring his forgiveness. His smiles on American Council of Arms. He says, by the way, note that this was the very first of 15 times that Congress called the people of the United States to prayer. And by the time you get to the year 1815, there had been 1,400 issued calls to prayer in America. I thought they wanted separation of church and state. You know why we have that? Because where they came from, if the king were Anglican, you were all Anglican. If he were Catholic, you were all Catholic. You had no choice in what church you pertained to, and so that's why they broke away. All they meant was separation of church and state, that there was not to be a state-sponsored religion. Who printed the first Bible in America? When they broke away from England, one of the first things they did is they printed the Bible of the Revelation. Guys, there's only 8 of those left, and I've held 2 of them. And did you know that in the front of that Bible, the first Bible printed by Congress, there is a congressional endorsement, a neat addition of the Holy Scriptures for the use of our schools. Close quote. Bible of the Revolution. Go look it up, guys. And by the way, we didn't have a Navy. Well, we kind of did. If you go on the 3rd floor of the United States History Museum there in Washington, D.C., you'll see this incredible boat, the gunboat Philadelphia, which is literally a rowboat with 2 cannons in it, and they sank it. But guys, I got to tell you this. When we started taking on the British, he wrote back to Abigail, he says, "It appears to me that the eternal Son of God is operating powerfully against the British nation." Guys, we were sinking frigates of wars with that little gunboat Philadelphia. Psalms 35 came alive to them. They knew that the hand of providence was real. In fact, when you get to this year, 1778, this is what George Washington said. He says that the hand of providence has been so conspicuous in all of this that he must be worse than an infidel that lacks faith and more than wicked that has not gratitude enough to acknowledge his obligations. George Washington. I love George. That's my middle name, by the way. I went there to Mount Vernon. I was the first guy down there that day, and I told that lady, the guard, I said, "Hey, we Georges got to stick together." I'm in such awe of the man and who I love, and Martha as well. I don't know if you've seen that movie, but go read the Bulletproof George Washington by David Barton. Go listen to it. It's like a movie. They've added music and voiceovers. And I just started talking about George, and the lady says, "You know what, sir, I'm going to do something real special for you." I said, "What?" She whips out her keys, and she unlocked the gates. And I got to stand in between George and Martha. And when she wasn't looking, I touched his grave. I had to. I love to touch history. But you know what? I'm going to tell you a history lesson right here that maybe you haven't heard of, because like I said, sometimes we have to do hard things. In fact, my friend Andy Andrews told me about this story, and I called him from the top of a little hill called Little Roundtop, just outside of this little town called Gettysburg. But Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain and the men of the 20th Maine, they had a really hard task. In fact, they gathered, guys, right there not too long ago, July 2nd, 1863, and they said to Joshua, he says, they were the far left of it, 80,000 men, and he says that at all hazards, don't you let the South up above this rock wall that you guys have just built here this day, because if they get above you guys, they'll take the high ground and they'll wipe us out in that little town down here called Gettysburg. Do you understand your charge? Yes, sir. At all hazards, Joshua, don't you let them through. Well, guys, that day, right at 2:30 p.m., the 15th and the 47th Alabama attacked, and they attacked with that rebel yell that just made your blood run cold. And they started coming up right down here from Devil's Den. And man, the firing started to take place, and they were strong. They got up close, they pushed them back. On the second charge, they got a little bit closer, and they pushed them back. On the third charge, they get over the wall, black powder's flying, guns are sounding, and they were able to get him right back over the wall. On the fourth charge, Chamberlain took a bullet to the belt buckle. He thought he was a dead man. Now he's watching his army being wiped out, bayonets and everything. But for some miracle happened, they were able to push them back one more time. Now these guys are down to 80 men out of bullets. No ammunition. Gather the bullets from the dead. We've already done that, sir. We're out. What are we going to do? Sergeant Tozier comes over and he says, do I sound the retreat? He says, no. Even one of his brothers came over and says, do I sound the retreat? He says, no, tell your brother Tom to keep his head down. With 3 of us up here, this could be a bad day for Mama. A real quote from that war. Watch this. So he says, what do we do? He says, fix bayonets. You heard it, still on still. And guess what? He says, exercise the great right wheel. What's that? He says, the colonel intends to charge. Here's a professor of rhetoric with no training. And before they could say anything, he pulls out his sword and he throws it downhill and he says, charge! Charge! And 80 men with no bullets held over 400 of the South at gunpoint. One guy had about 100 guys by a tree like this. And Joshua walks by him. He says, sir, I have no bullets. He says, well, don't tell them that. Real quotes from the Civil War, guys. Have you heard these stories? It's amazing. And the reason I tell you these stories is because historians a lot smarter than me say that if this man right here hadn't made that one move that one day, we would not be the United States of America. We would look a lot more like Europe, a patchwork of different countries, the country of Virginia, the country of Texas, country of Florida. But because these 80 men made one move on one day, we are now the United States of America. They said because if they had lost that battle, that the South would have won. And it would have totally changed us. We would not have had the manpower, the military power, to fight 2 wars on 2 sides with Hitler and Hirohito, guys. We would have been wiped out. But that guy did it. In fact, he became the governor of Maine years later. And I want to drive this point home because this is a story most people don't know. He gets this letter, and I want to read some of the words of it. Let's turn the volume up on this a little bit. This letter shows up on his desk, and he says, Dear Sir, I want to tell you of a little passage in the Battle of Little Roundtop, Gettysburg, concerning you and me, which I am now glad of. Twice in that fight, I had your life in my hands. I got a safe place between 2 rocks and drew bead fair and square on you. You were standing in the open behind the center of your line, full exposed. I know you're ranked by your uniform and actions, and I thought it a mighty good thing to put you out of the way. I rested my gun on the rock and took steady aim. I started to pull the trigger, but some strange notion stopped me. Then I got ashamed of my weakness and went through the same emotions again. I had you, practically certain. But that same strange something shut right down on me. I couldn't pull the trigger and gave it up. That is your life. I am glad of it now and hope you are. Yours truly, a member of the 15th Alabama. Guys, one of my favorite books says, thy days are known and thy years shall not be numbered less. If you're still here in this room or watching on the broadcast tonight, we got people from England and France and other people watching tonight. Guys, if you're still here, you have yet to live your mission. If you woke up 6 feet above ground, you're supposed to be here. Do you know how many horses were shot out from underneath George Washington? 3. You know how many bullet holes he had through his chest and out his back with no scars? The natives, whose rifles knew not how to miss, thought he was the Great Spirit. God and his hand of providence have been so conspicuous in all of this, said George. He knows from experience. I love this flag, and we're going to hear about the history of it, guys. This is the actual Star-Spangled Banner, the one that waved over that bay right there, guys, in Maryland. And in Baltimore. I'm just so honored. I can't wait till you guys hear the story of that. But I have a story about our flag. I got 5 minutes. I was reminded just the other day as I walked through a county courthouse square. On a park bench, an old man was sitting there. I said, hey, your old courthouse is kind of run down. He said, nah, it'll do for our little town. I said, your old flagpole has leaned a little bit. And that's a ragged old flag you got hanging on it. He said, have a seat. And I sat down. Is this the first time you've been to our little town? I said, I think it is. he said, I don't like to brag, but we're kind of proud of that ragged old flag. You see, we got a little hole in that flag over there when Washington took it across the Delaware. And she got powder burned the night that Francis Scott Key sat watching it writing, oh, say, can you see? She got a bad rip in New Orleans with Jackson and Packingham tugging at her seams. And she almost fell at the Alamo beside the Texas flag. Oh, but she waved on, though. She got cut with a sword at Chancellorsville, and she got cut again at Shiloh Hill. There was Robert E. Lee, Beauregard, and Bragg, and the south wind blew hard on that ragged old flag. On Flanders Field in World War I, she got a big hole from a Bertha gun. She turned blood red in World War II. She hung limp and low a time or two. She was in Korea and Vietnam. She went wherever she was sent by her Uncle Sam. She waved from our ships upon the brawny foam, and now they just about quit waving her back here at home. In her own good land, here she's been abused. She's been burned, dishonored, denied, refused. And the government for which she stands is scandalized throughout the land. And she's getting threadbare, and she's wearing thin. But she's in good shape for the shape she's in, because she's been through the fire before, and I believe she can take a whole lot more. So we raise her up every morning, and we take her down every night. We never let her touch the ground, and we fold her up right. You know what, on second thought, I do like to brag, because I'm mighty, mighty proud of that ragged old flag. Thank you, Johnny Cash. Don't you love that? You can tell I'm a country boy. You know, this boy right here, one of our founding fathers. In fact, he was said by John Adams of being one of the most incredible men on earth. He was included in the top 3 of the founding fathers, according to John Adams. This man did so much for our country. Go look his name up. But you know what? He had a vision of our future. He saw a child carrying a history book from the future. And in this vision, he was able to read about it. You see, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson were best of friends for a long time, but they allowed politics to get in the way of that. And then they became sworn enemies, just like today's politicians. And you know what? He read in this history book from the future that Mr. Adams had written a letter to Thomas Jefferson, and he apologized in it. He says, let's bury our politics and come together and be brothers once again. Well, I am a romantic, and I'm so glad to tell you guys the rest of the story that, yes, they became best of friends one more time until their deaths, which happened to be when? 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. On the 3rd of July, Thomas Jefferson lay dying on his deathbed, and he says, what day is it? They didn't want to tell him. Sir, it's the 3rd of July. Oh, to breathe the air of the 50th anniversary of our Declaration. He made it. And he resigned himself to his child and to his God, his dying words, and he died. Little did he know that his best friend on another part of the country, that's Thomas Jefferson's bed where he passed, but on his deathbed, guys, was John Adams. You know what his dying words were? Before he gave his dying words, he sat up in his bed and he says, Thomas Jefferson survives. I want to believe that the spirit of his dear friend came to welcome him through that veil. But the last dying words of that little 10-year-old patriot were these: independence forever. I love freedom. We need to understand why we fly these flags, why we stand up, why we salute, why do we do that pledge? Guys, because some things are bigger than us. And this man who wrote this book, Dr. Viktor Frankl, I had his grandson on my podcast. He survived not 1, not 2, but 3 Nazi death camps. And he always believed that freedom is different than liberty. It's not the land of freedom. It's not the freedom bell or the land of freedom, guys. It's liberty. Freedom is eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. Liberty, he says, is freedom with responsibility. You've seen the liberty, statue of responsibility. This man survived not one, not two, but 3 Nazi death camps. His wife was ripped from his arms, his loved ones were ripped from his arms, and his life's work was burned in a fire as he watched it go up in smoke. He had to see himself beyond the barbed wires, beyond the machine guns. And he says this in his first chapter of this book. He says, don't aim at success, for success like happiness cannot be pursued, it must ensue, and can only do so as an unintended side effect to one's dedication to a cause greater than oneself. He simplifies it in the next breath when he writes these words: if you know your why, you can endure almost anyhow. Sometimes we wonder how we're going to save America, how we're going to do it. You know what? It's prophesied. God has it all figured out, but he's counting on us to rise up and shine forth, just like these men and women, our black founding fathers, our Hispanic founding fathers, our children that were involved, the women that were involved in the founding of this nation. There were so many, guys, we can't count them all. But I want to say this. I'm going to go ahead and sing a song right now, and I'm going to end it with this. Hope you guys, if you know the words, you'll sing along with me. If tomorrow all the things were gone I worked for all my life, and I had to start again with just my children and my wife, I thank my lucky stars to be living here today, 'cause the flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away. Sing with me now. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the ones who died, who gave that right to me. And I'll gladly stand up next to you. I need more track. There it is. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. Look, they're waving those flags back there. I love it. That's what it's about, guys, right here tonight. Feel free to do that. You'll keep me on the beat, too. Here we go. From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across the plains of Texas, from sea to shining sea, from Detroit down to Houston, from New York to Orem, there's pride in every American heart, and it's time we stand and say together now that I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the ones who died, who gave that right to me. And I'll gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. One more time, real loud. 'Cause I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the ones who died, who gave that right to me. And I'll gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. God bless the USA. Look at those flags out there. May God continue to bless America. You know what? I love you guys, and I share that this is a true blessed nation. As he mentioned earlier, a chosen nation. This is the inheritance of Joseph. This was the land of the Garden of Eden. The ark was American-made. Think about that for a second. How cool. Anyways, guys, we love this nation. The last shall be first, and the first shall be last. May God bless you. God bless your dreams. And may God bless America. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.